When I lost my baby in a car accident, Preston just happened to be driving by with his female assistant in the passenger seat. He saw my white dress soaked in blood, shielded his assistant's curious eyes, and coldly muttered, "Bad luck, don't look." Then he sped off. That same night, while I was in the bedroom, I found a lace bra stuffed in the corner of our closet. A bra that definitely wasn't mine. Closing the closet door, I calmly dialed a number. "Mr. Miller, I've made up my mind. I can leave the city next week and start at your company." "That's wonderful news, Miss Baker. We're excited to have you on board," he replied cheerfully. The second the call ended, Preston walked out of the bathroom. His hair was damp, and beads of water still clung to his skin. He used to take 5 minutes in the shower. Lately, he's been spending at least half an hour, always with his phone in hand. "Who were you talking to?" he asked, not even looking up from his phone. "I was on the phone with Mr. Miller," I replied honestly. "Ah," he said, barely paying attention. As usual, he wasn't really listening, and for the first time I didn't get mad or make a fuss. I just started drafting my resignation letter on my phone. When he reached for his water cup, likely expecting the calming tea I used to make for him every night, he paused, noticing it wasn't there. Finally, he spared me a glance. "I showed your CT scan to a specialist. He said it was just a minor injury. Nothing serious. Just keep the wound dry." "All right," I said without looking up, still typing. This afternoon, I had 8 stitches in my leg from the accident. Worse still, I had just found out I was 4 weeks pregnant and already showing signs of miscarriage. The doctor apologized, saying that if I had been brought to the hospital sooner, the baby might have been saved. Seeing the blank expression on my face, Preston frowned and started walking over to check what I was doing. But just then his phone buzzed. His lips curved into a smile, and without a second thought, he turned and disappeared into his study. Once he was out of sight, I opened up my secret social media account and scrolled through his feed. Sure enough, there was a new post, visible to everyone but me. It was an apology letter. I shouldn't have let the cutest assistant in the world down. Promised her dinner after work, but work got in the way, and I made her wait a whole 10 minutes. Totally my fault. I'll do better from now on. Be a good boss. I liked the post and in the same breath, received a notification from Mr. Miller. The contract. I clicked the link and signed the document without hesitation. The next morning, Preston woke up early and brought back bagels and pastries from a well-known restaurant. Just as I was about to open the bag with chocolate croissants, he slapped my hand away. "You like peanut butter bagels, right? I got one just for you." I froze for a second before realizing the chocolate croissants weren't for me. They were for his assistant, for Penelope Hepburn. I couldn't hold back anymore. "We've been together for 7 years, and you still don't know I'm allergic to peanuts?" His expression darkened and he stood abruptly, snapping, "Stop making a fuss. Eat or don't. I don't care." As he prepared to leave, I walked into the bedroom and came back with a bag. "When you see Penelope later, do me a favor and return this to her." His brows knitted together before taking the bag. When he peeked inside and saw the lace bra, a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. He opened his mouth like he was about to explain something, but when he saw my calm, indifferent face, he only said, "I'll tell her to stop being so careless." "Yeah," I replied with a quiet tone. Sensing my low mood, Preston offered, "I can give you a ride to work today." 7 years together, and not once had he driven me to work. No matter how bad the weather was, he always kept work and personal life separate. But Penelope, on her first day at work as his assistant, she was already getting chauffeured by my partner. As I pondered the difference between how Preston treated his assistant and his own partner, I accidentally knocked my fork to the floor. My fingers trembled as I bent down to pick it up. When I straightened, I saw Preston standing at the entrance, already ready to leave. Without looking back, he tossed over his shoulder. "Something urgent came up at the office. I'll give you a ride next time," he said before hurrying out the door. Half an hour later, I limped into my cubicle to work. For some reason, my colleagues looked at me with a mix of sympathy and concern. Later, while filling my mug with water in the break room, I overheard 2 colleagues whispering to each other. "So it's true, Mr. Sloan really ditched Olivia for that his female assistant." One asked, you should have seen it this morning. Penelope came in with a little stain on her dress, and Mr. Sloan picked her up in front of everyone in the meeting room." The other replied. My hand slipped, and the mug shattered on the floor, silencing their gossip. I crouched down to gather the pieces, carefully tossing them into the trash can without saying anything. I ended up working late. It was past 10 o'clock when suddenly, I felt a weight on my shoulders. "Olivia," Preston muttered, draping a coat on my shoulders. "Why didn't you respond to my messages?" I didn't turn around. Instead, I checked my phone to see a message from him. "What flavor of milkshake do you usually like?" 3 years ago, I asked him for the first milkshake of summer. Back then, he had only looked at me with disdain and said, "Milkshake? You want me to order a milkshake for you? Olivia, you're almost 30. Don't make me sick with this childish crap." But behind me, there he was bringing me a milkshake. I focused my eyes on the computer screen before me, ignoring the sweet beverage. I could sense his facial expression shifting as he spoke again. "You used to beg me for this," he said, sounding confused. "It's past 10. If I drink it now, I won't be able to sleep," I said dismissively. There was a brief silence. Then in a cold voice, he muttered, "I'm going to the bathroom. Let's go home together after." Barely 30 seconds later, his phone lit up on my desk. I glanced to see that it was a message from Penelope. "You silly, who sends dozens of milkshakes all at once? You're not trying to turn me into a little piggy, are you?" Shivering here, I shifted my eyes back to the computer screen nonchalantly and organized the files on my desk. We got home a little after 11. As soon as I stepped out of the car, I headed straight into the bedroom and started packing my things. When Preston walked in, freshly showered, he noticed my vanity looking emptier than usual. He frowned but didn't seem to mind it. "Hey, I'm going on a business trip to Paris next month. If you want anything, just make a list, and I'll get it for you." I didn't even hesitate. "Nah, I don't want anything. Thanks anyway. After all, I was leaving in a few days. What was the point?" Suddenly, he threw his towel onto the bed, his eyes cold as he stared at me. So what? You're upset because I bought you the wrong breakfast? Is that what this is about? I opened my mouth to explain I wasn't angry, but he let out a scoff before I could speak. You know I can't stand women being dramatic. Olivia, you're being out of line, he said with a hint of disgust and dismay. With that, he stormed into his study, slamming the door behind him. In our 7 years together, he was always the first to give countless silent treatments, and every single time, I had always humbled myself to apologize and make it up. But this time, I just cocked an eyebrow and turned off the bedside lamp. He stayed in the study all night. For the first time, he didn't hear a single knock on the door. The next morning, I made breakfast for both of us as usual. I just finished eating my portion and was getting ready to leave for work when he came out of the study. He was on his phone when he barked at me. Take the day off. By 5 p.m., I need you to make me an identical fondant cake. Ever since Preston and I started dating, I'd been making him a birthday cake every single year, always manually. When I glanced at the screen of his phone, I knew right then who it was for again. I'd seen that little cartoon avatar on his phone. It was Penelope's profile picture. I didn't say a thing, making the living room feel unervingly quiet. But Preston was completely unaware of how unreasonable his request had been. He looked at me, waiting for a yes. Eventually, I just nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Send me the picture, I said, standing up. I'll head out now to buy the ingredients. I thought back to that dinner 7 years ago. If Preston hadn't been there, I wouldn't have made it out of my first job unscathed. I glanced at him one last time, thinking, once I finish this cake, I'll finally be done with him. I headed for the door, feeling the heaviness in my steps. Before I could reach the doorway, Preston's voice, surprised, cut through the silence behind me. Olivia, he started, his voice unsure. I didn't bother turning around. Anything else? I asked, my tone flat. There was a pause before he spoke again. Hey, I'll Venmo you for the ingredients. I continued on my tracks without a word. When I stepped into the elevator, I pulled out my phone. Opening up our chat history, I stared at the numbers. 5,363. That's how many messages I sent him. He'd replied to only 25. It was draining to care, so I could only smirk. Upstairs, in the living room, Preston's phone would buzz with the notification of the $100 transfer being rejected. I could imagine his hand clenched around the phone as he read the alert. Later that night, around 8 p.m., my phone rang. Preston's name flashed on the screen. Hey, where are you? He asked, sounding almost concerned.